Hi everyone, welcome to another PR video. And I always wanted to do another tier list. I had done one in the past about how I rate the Power Ranger seasons in general, and I said I always wanted to do a tier list on all the morphers. But there's a ton of morphers, and then there's some things that count as morphers and not count as morphers. Then you have, various different versions of the morphers in general, the Power Morpher has been released in so many different variations from either movie versions, alternate versions like Tommy's, or between the two companies from Bandai and Hasbro. So, how do I want to do the list? Do I want to try to do every single thing? And then you have to also deal with, the Japanese versions. As we go along, the Japanese versions were more better while the US versions went down. So, which ones do I consider? Do I consider Japanese versions along with the US version? So the tier list would be really huge. How can I make it so that it's a little bit easier to deal with? So I said, all right, it wouldn't be fair to include some of the battleizers because some are morphers, but then others are buckles. So I said, all right, I'll decide to remove the battleizers. I may do a video specifically on the battleizers in the future. As for how should I count morphers depending on Japanese versions or alternate versions that were released later, I decided on Japanese versions and US versions will be interchangeable. I will only choose the Japanese version over the US version if it has a significant changes done. And there will be some seasons that will, I'll have to include both because they do have different morphers under those conditions. As for alternate versions, meaning like Hasbro versions, Bandai versions, I will include as separately to list improvements because the Artisan/Memorial editions do have a lot more better features in those, and it shouldn't be neglected. However, I will keep the list specifically for Power Rangers only, meaning MMPR to Dino Fury, so nothing after or before what has been skipped. So I guess we have to start off with the largest list because there's so many different variations of the Power Morpher that's been released from the original 1993 one all the way to the 2017 movie. So where would I put the Power Morpher? Now, the Power Morpher in the 1993 version is fairly straightforward and very simplistic. It just simply opens up, you get the 5 power coins, and, that's it. I mean, I would probably put it in C tier, the original release, mainly because of the ridiculous nature of where they screwed up the sticker. I don't understand how Bandai did that. It was like, in the Japanese version, it said Goryu Sentai Zyuranger, and the handle was on the bottom. In the US Power Rangers TV series, the front stickers were changed, but it said Power Rangers, and they hold the Morpher from the bottom. The toy, for whatever reason, was flipped upside down where the handle was on the top. It's cool because it's very unique. It's a buckle Morpher. It's not, hand mounted at this time. Now, since we didn't get Tommy's Morpher in the US, I have to go on the Dragon Buckler. Now, for pretty much, it's identical to the original Power Morpher/Dino Buckler. The only difference is that it has gold plates, and they included the 6 coin. Now, in the Japanese version, they included all the coins, so you had all 6 coins. Unlike in the Legacy release of Tommy's Morpher, they only included his Green and White Ranger coin, which I thought was stupid. So I think, overall, I would give the Dragon Buckler a B, simply because it has a little bit of extra features. Let's move on to the Legacy edition of the Power Morpher. Now, we got a lot more improvements with the Legacy version of the Power Morpher in additional sound effects, die-cast parts on the plates, the handle, the coins. The coins are much more detailed. They're weathered instead of being gold. I think I would give it a solid B, but I do have a couple of caveats on it. I do like that they added a lot of die-cast parts, but because they added the die-cast to the front plates, it didn't look like the show anymore. When they add improvements, I'm all welcome for that. New sound effects, features that were missing from the original version or features that were impossible back in the time when they originally made them. Altering the design appearance of what it appeared on the show, I always never cared for that. The coins, of course, the same thing. It's like, again, I like a weathered look, but at the same time, I would have preferred the gold look from the original toy. So it's just a personal preference thing. Cool, but too much. And then on top of it, they put so much die-cast metal in it, it was much more heavier than what you expect to use. They put it on the handle, which I thought was ridiculous. And then, of course, it gets one negative because they forgot to include the button to be red. I never understood why. They put so much effort into the Power Morpher, they forgot the button to make it red. It was very odd that they did that little weird mistake. Power Morpher Legacy Edition Tommy version. Again, pretty much the same thing, but I will put it down as a C. Because again, like I said before, they forgot the other coins. You know, it's like cool that we got proper Green Ranger coin, proper White Ranger coin, but at the end of the day, the original Power Morpher came with 5 coins. So we were kind of gypped out of coins when they could have literally put all the coins in there. Now, if they wanted to put the Ninjetti coins in there, for example, they could have done that as well, and I would have been okay with that. But you paid for pretty much the same for less. Now, the movie edition Power Morphers, I never personally cared for. Again, they were just a very simple repaint of the original Morphers. So, yes, they added the die-cast parts, and then they, unfortunately, you know, used them upside down in the movie, which, again, I don't understand why they did that. It looks very strange, and it wasn't even for all the Rangers. I think some of the Rangers had it upside down, and some of them had it right side up. So, I mean, you could use it either way because it's the front plates are blank, but the main issue with those, you had to buy multiple versions of the Morpher. Now, I didn't like that in general. I always thought, like, the Power Morpher design was so, like, cool that you could have literally built it all into one toy and simply had the plates, you know, removable, swappable. So you could have included all of them in there. And that's what I wish they did as an improvement. So overall, because it's just really a minor, you know, difference, and then you're forced to pay for all the different color variants, I'm going to lower it down to a D. The Lightning Collection Power Morpher, whether it's the movie edition or the original Power Morpher, I thought it was cool because it gives you the really nice stand, and it does look more like what it looked like in the TV show. They didn't put the crazy amount of die cast on it. The power coins are more gold. They're not weathered. I would give the original Power Morpher Lightning Edition an A. Not quite perfect, but almost there. I think it's just, it looked a little too cheap. It's not really detailed. Again, I get it because it was a really large piece of plastic. They couldn't really add extra detail to it. The movie edition is pretty much the same thing, but it would still fall under D because, again, because they did not add the swapping feature for the plates, you have to buy multiple different versions to get different things. The 2017 Power Morpher, which a lot of people forget because it wasn't even in the film, its design was pretty crummy. The one main feature of the Power Morpher was the whole egg opening feature. That's what made it unique. And that was all lost versus like the wind-up function, which makes the coin spin. And that's really it. I didn't think it added pretty much anything. It was fairly large, so that was a plus. But it also looked like it was like kind of looked like a wind, like a hurricane. So like it would fit more like a Ninja Storm, for example. It didn't really fit into the motif of even the movie's designs. The movie designs were very drastically different from what the show usually did with them, but it overall really did not work in the aesthetics of what the movie did. So overall, I think I would put it in D. It's not horrible, but it's not great. We can finally move on to Zeo now. So we have the Zeonizer and the Gold Ranger Zeonizer, which was only released as a toy version. Whatever reason, Jason didn't get a Morpher, even though it exists in O-Ranger. There was really no alterations onto the toy, so pretty much either the US or Japanese version are good. They do have limited functionality. It really only has a couple of beeps, and that's it. But it looks pretty cool. It does have die-cast parts, and it's actually a two-piece Morpher, although it's pretty hard to use because you have to click it in and flip it up and that. I would give the original releases B. Unique design. I like two-piece Morphers. Just what it lacked in was sound effects. Now, the legacy versions of the Zeonizer and the Gold Ranger Zeonizer, now that's a little bit different story. That one's a very good, positive improvement on it for most areas. It added a lot of new sound effects. The mold is very faithful to the design. It's the exact same size. They added details all over the place. I think the only negatives really is this crappy dial, which is hard to turn because it's chrome, and then they didn't add any slits to it. And the fake voices. They didn't hire any of the actors back to record their lines. They did add additional sound effects. They added the light changing color, so it's a really good improvement. And the only other negative is that they made the stupid die-cast clip over here a little too thick, so it bangs a lot. So you can't really get it to work unless it's like really straight on. A lot of good positives. The same goes for the Gold Zeonizer. It's pretty much the same thing. It's just a gold version. I would definitely give this one a B. It does have really good improvements, but it was hampered by its slight design flaw and the lack of the actual actors coming back to do the voices. Now, the Turbo Morpher, the only Morpher that was done for that season. Cool, unique. I did like that they kept the die-cast metal key, so really nothing to complain about. It's pretty much identical to the Japanese version. But again, it only really has 2 sound effects. Change and, the button for calling. I would give it a C, I guess, as a bonus. In Lost Galaxy, they did reissue the Turbo Morpher as the Galaxy Morpher. It's literally identical. The only thing they did was change the stickers. The Astro Morpher, again, probably one of a really cool Morpher. I think a ton of people love it. I love it, and very little was changed from the Japanese version to the US version. It has a really cool digitized voice, so you can activate all the commands. I would definitely give the Astro Morpher an A. It's really cool, but I don't think it really deserves an S because of what they did with the digitizer. The digitizer was reissued in the Artisan line with a vast amount of improvements. I think one of the key features of the Artisan version was the voice controls. Now, I know in the digitizer, the Astro Morpher, a lot of the things was done by commands from the buttons, and you would call Zords or you would morph with those buttons. But in the Artisan ones, they actually added voice commands so that you can actually do all the commands voice activated, so you don't even have to push the buttons, which would mimic what the show, because many times they did use their voices instead of using the punch-in commands. So they added that, and plus they added tons of voice lines from the characters, from Dr. Kubota to Mega Silver. You have all the other main actors, so you had a ton of voices and additional sound effects that were just improved on, including the opening. Now, they included the opening in the original K-Tizer toy, but in the digitizer, they didn't do that. So I would definitely put the Artisan version of the digitizer in S. It's perfect. It improved drastically on the electronics, and it still had all the positives from the original release. Of course, the Digimorpher, aka the K-Tizer for Zane's Morpher. Yeah, there were slight differences from the Japanese version. They did screw with the screen. They made it a sticker instead of a screen, but it's a very minor issue. But I would pick the Japanese version over that as well. It did have the opening theme song, and it had pretty much all the main functions in the toy from the show. And it was the very first cell phone Morpher, basically. I think it's fairly unique, even till today. Again, those cell phones are outdated now. We don't make those type of cell phones anymore, so as a Morpher, they're fairly unique. I would definitely put it in B. Even the Japanese version, even though it has a better screen, I still would put it in B. I think the only thing that kind of lacked on the toy was the antenna. I think it was way too short, and I wish they had made it a little bit longer. So we have the Transmorpher, aka the Ginga Brace in Lost Galaxy. I think it's okay. It's fairly simple. I think a lot of people don't really care for it because, again, a lot of people don't like the Lost Galaxy designs, everyone Charlie Brown stuff. I think it's a solid C. Although I'll pick the Japanese version more over the English version, mainly because the English version had this weird, odd issue with the sounds where they just abruptly cut off. While the Japanese sound effects go on for like a couple of seconds longer, I don't understand why it happened. There was really no reason to do it. It must have just been some weird issue when they transferred the sounds over to the English board. Now, we know the Magna Defender Morpher is actually the aura changer, so I'm actually going to be comparing the aura changer as well. Now, the Magna Defender Morpher in Ginga Man was really just the sword. He really didn't have a changer at all, and he just used the power of the sword. So that was the reason why they gave the Magna Defender the Aura Changer Morpher. We didn't use it in Season 2, so they just repurposed it. And I think the Morpher's okay. It's a two-piece Morpher, so I thought it was cool for that factor. But again, it really didn't have that many sound effects. It literally only has one sound effect, so it wasn't great. So I would definitely put the Aura Changer in C. It's cool, the design is cool, but because it lacks functions, and then also on top of it, it had a battery issue. Now, in the original release, not the US one, they actually used a battery type called LR44. They're basically the same width as AAA batteries, but they're shorter. That's the reason why the Aura Changer was smaller. compared to the Lost Galaxy version. It had a more extended thing because they put in AAA batteries because the LR44 batteries are uncommon. However, they still exist, so even if you have any of the older toys that do use the LR44 batteries, which is not that many, I can only think of 2 right now. There's probably a couple more, but like the V-Changer necklace and the Aura Changer use the LR44 batteries. The Artisan release, it did add a couple of additional sound effects, but it's pretty much the exact same thing. I would probably make that B, mainly because the batteries, they switched them to coin cell, and it is a little bit more of a visual improvement. And of course, you get both of them. You get the Keyblade Changer and the Aura Changer in one set, so it does offset that. And I think they added a couple of extra details to the Keyblade Changer key to make it a little bit more detailed. The Rescue Morpher from Lightspeed Rescue. I'm going to be picking the Japanese version over it, mainly because the Japanese version actually had a functioning LCD screen and a game built into it. As for the design itself, I think it's okay. It's kind of like, it is unique, but it really didn't have that many features besides the game. The game does give it, good replayability, but it is fairly simple. I would probably definitely put it under B. The mini game is cool. Screen's really small though, so you really can't do much. Although it's really nicely animated when you select different modes. It just shows change. Victory Robo, it will animate, and that's where all the stickers in the US version were based off. And it does do the same sound effects in the US version, so I do like the lights on the side. Now the Titanium Morpher, which was our first US released Ranger / and of course he got an exclusive Morpher that was only for Lightspeed Rescue. It was kind of simplistic because it didn't have that many sound effects. It did have Morph. It did have like a calling sound effect, but I think what really makes it unique was the hollow reflective foil sticker on the front, which resembles the Max Solar Zord, which again that was his Zord, so they incorporated those elements in. So yeah, I think it was really cool. It was fairly large too, so it was highly detailed, which was surprising because usually you expect. If it's a U.S. Morpher and they have to design something from scratch, they wouldn't put that much effort in. But for Ryan's sake, they did a really good job, and I think it's a very sought-after Morpher. And it's one of those Morphers I wish they would reissue, because I think they could include a lot more additional features there. And I would also like to hear the actors come back to do voice lines to incorporate it. So I definitely put it in B. The Chrono Morpher, I think even though they took the mini game out of from the Japanese version, I think the US version holds up really well. I think it's very unique. It tries to be very futuristic because again it comes from the year 3000s, so they try to give it that look. And I do like the whole cool lights that spin around it, showcasing the modes. Now, the spinning light in the Japanese version, that's how they used to select modes and for game functions. So that's what the lights were mainly for, specifically the red ones. And that's why they're arrows and stuff in order to do the minigame selection. So that's why it doesn't really make sense in the US version. I like the sound effects. I like the morph sound effect. The design and shape was pretty cool. I would definitely give it an A. I think it's just from its look and what it had in its features, I think it was a solid, cool, futuristic Morpher that I think still holds up today. It still holds up like, yeah, it's a Morpher that could have been done in the future and and not contemporary. Now, the Quantum Morpher is a unique beast because in Japan, they did not get an official changer for a Time Fire. The reason why that happened was because you got his changer in with the V-Rex Robo. So on Time Force, they did release a US-specific one for it. And surprisingly, just like the Titanium Ranger, it was a really cool Morpher. It didn't have the voice control features like in the show, but it had a couple of buttons. But it did have this interactive screen, which was like surprising. If you watch it in the show, it didn't really have an LCD screen. It did as an animation, but it wasn't in the toy or / prop. But they added this little screen that had a number on it, so it added like this extra thing. And I was like, well, that looks pretty cool. And I always wanted to have the US release, and it's probably one of those Morphers that probably Japan really wants to, because they didn't get an official one. I would definitely give it an A. I think I really like this design. I would have loved to put it in S, but they didn't not all the buttons function. That was the one thing they cheapened out on. Not all buttons function. They're just solid pieces of plastic. I want to put it in A for effort of releasing a proper Morpher that Japan didn't get. Now, Wild Force's Morphers, the Growlphone and the Lunar Caller, there's some differences between the Japanese version. I prefer the Japanese versions over the English ones. But the Growlphone in general is a very odd thing. It had this whole person mode, and I always thought that was a very odd addition to the phone because, like, you know, when you have it, because it has the person mode in it, it's kind of annoying because a lot of times the arms can flop out, the legs can pop out when you're trying to hold it or do morph poses. So that kind of it really drags the toy down because of that, and it was really not a cool feature. I did like the feature where it could transform into the specific animal shapes. That was a cool thing, but because they made it the whole person element, I didn't really care for it. So I would put it in C. Now the lunar collar, solid B. I like that it was a brace again. You know, you put it on your hand, it comes off, you can call, you can do all the functions. I think it was just a little too small, but other than that, overall, I think solid B. Next up is Ninja Storm. So we have the Wind Morpher, the Thunder Morpher, and the Samurai Cyclone Morpher. I think all the Morphers in that season were very unique, especially Cam's Morpher. Yeah, this is where we started getting into the more alterations routine of Bandai from the Japanese version. So again, for the Wind and Thunder Morpher, I will definitely pick the Japanese versions over the English versions. Functionality-wise, the Wind Morpher has cool features. It has cool sound effects. It has the ninja beams, which we called the Ninja Storm, which was the shuriken mode where it threw out things. You had all the ability to change the shinobi medals / the power discs. I would definitely give the Wind Morpher an A. You can have all, like I said, the power discs can be swapped around, so you can just use that as it. The reason why I didn't want to give it an S is because it doesn't have the functionality of like reading the power disc / shinobi medals, so you can't like have additional sound effects. That's the one thing I hated about Ninja Storm. You had this whole power sphere, Karakuri ball system in the toys. They all in the Japanese version they came with the discs. And like, there's no sound effect function for those. It can't read nothing. You can put them on there. They're good for display, but no sound effects. So that's the reason why I didn't want to give it an S. The Thunder Morpher now, unfortunately, didn't have a lot of features. It's a really cool design. I love the bug theme. Always did. It only has a calling noise and a morph noise. Smaller than the Wind Morpher, so I would put it in C. The Samurai Cyclone Morpher is kind of a hard thing to pick because, again, the Japanese and US versions are different, and usually the Japanese versions are better, but the Japanese version lacked one thing. It did not come with his fire mode shinobi medal. You know, he has a different emblem on his chest when he turns into super mode. And there's no way to actually open shuriken ball in the Japanese version, while in the US version you can, so you could insert the shinobi medal's power disc, so you regain functionality in the US version. However, the US version sucks because it's way smaller, and you have to do this pump action thing in order for the power disc to spin, versus in the Japanese version, in the back, you had a wind-up function so that you just simply had to click the button and it would spin automatically to do his change transformation. And that one's better because the pumping one sucks. Either you press it too many times so it plays twice, or it just, your fingers hurts after a bit. So there's positives between the two versions. Ultimately, the Japanese version is better because it's bigger and it's show accurate. I would put it in B. It's unique, but its uniqueness kind of annoys you because it's a ball. There's no way to display it properly. It didn't come with a stand, for example. Dino Thunder's Morphers, I think they were pretty cool. I like the whole head plate thing, where you got different sound effects depending on which Morpher plate you put on, the Brachiomorph and whatnot. Japanese versions were more better overall because they included more sound effects. Unlike what happened in Ninja Storm, they learned their lesson and included additional sound effects when you connected the head plates, in the Japanese versions at least. Specifically in the Dino Commander, which is the Brachiomorpher, you plug in the Auxiliary Zords head plates and it actually speaks and you hear their voices. And that was another thing that was cut out in the US version because we lost the whole, the dinosaurs talk through those changers in Abaranger. They had to take out all the voice lines in there as well. So all we got was the change sound effect and the morph sound effect and the calling sound effect. And then another feature they took out in the US version was the jaw locking mechanism. All of them had a jaw locking feature in some capacity, and they just took it out. I don't know why. I guess it was just extra pieces so that they didn't want to include it. B, cool but really small. I think that's the main thing with Dino Morpher. Now, the gold version from the Max Brace, it's literally identical. The only difference is that it's gold. Categorize it in B. It's the same thing. I think it was a missed opportunity to include additional sound effects in the Max Brace. which we didn't even get in the US release. The Brachial Morpher, again, unique, very unique. It was kind of funny that Tommy came back and he was using a key-based Morpher again, since this last one he used was turbo. But the key in the US release sucked, very sucked. It was shrunk, it was plastic. I highly suggest getting the Dino Commander if you really wanted Tommy's Morpher. Get the Japanese version; it's much more better. I would definitely give the Dino Commander an S. I really love the metal key. The Japanese version is full size. It comes with all the additional sound effects with the auxiliary Zords. It can read most head plates, not all head plates, most head plates. And I think because it was a much larger size compared to the Dino Morpher that I liked it more. The Drago Morpher, again, it's pretty much like the Dino Morpher. It can't read all the head plates, same issue. But, you know, it did have the locking feature. Pull the jaw down and then they removed the pulling piece. So the lockjaw feature was still in the US version, but they just changed the way it was. Very strange. You know, overall B. It's cool, but like it wasn't really any type of like, you know, any improvement over the Dino Morpher. Now we're starting to get into the territory of the US versions getting worse. I do like the Delta Morpher. I do like the Morphers in SPD. Japanese versions only, though. Because the main reason is that in the Japanese version, the SP license comes with all the Ranger stickers, so you can choose which one. However, it was stupid because they were stickers, so you really could only put on one without destroying all the other ones. That was its main negative, and they incorporated, you know, this whole, you know, detective cop thing where it's a badge. So it's like, you know, old style badge. They open them up, and then and that was cool. I like that design. It has the voice cast. It had the cast in there from the original release, so you got to hear you know, the main cast in the master license. And the SP license, it does have additional sound effects. It just has Judgment Time. In the Japanese version, it actually has Guilty and Innocent, which is randomized. In the English version, it was only just Guilty, and that was it. It is kind of annoying because again, it doesn't connect to your hand, but it did have the carry case, which the English one butchered because it was this huge piece that was seen in the show, but they made it a dinky little plastic thing that you clipped on, which was really difficult to use in the US version. They took out phone mode. So Japanese version would definitely get an A. It was very unique. Same thing with the master license, aka the Patrol Morpher. I would definitely give it an A. It has additional sound effects, meaning the voice cast in there to give it to you. And they did come with additional stickers too, so you had two choices of stickers, Doggy Kruger or Ranger Doggy Kruger. Of course, this season had additional Morphers that were not officially released in the toy line. They were giveaways. So technically there was an official release for Swan's Morpher, aka Cat Ranger, but it was only as a very limited raffle, I think. She pretty much identical. The only difference is you got her Deca Swan's ID as a sticker, but the sound effects were pretty much the same, and then the only difference was the front. I would definitely give it an A. The only negative really was because it was a limited release, which I really freaking hated. It's just like Swans should have been released. Same thing for Mari Golds, which was another customized version of the SP license. It didn't come out originally, so you couldn't get that one either. I would assume if it did have a toy release, it would have been identical. The Brace Throttle. Very unique Morpher. It incorporated the whole, you know, his theme. So he has a bike throttle on it. The thing flipped out for Guilty or Innocent. Japanese one specifically functioned properly. It had all the options to do. It had the proper functioning thing, handle to rotate. So yes, I would definitely give the Brace Throttle an A. Now, the reason why I don't give the Deca Ranger Changers an S is because the Artisan line. The Master license, the Fire Squad license, and the SP license were all released in the Artisan line with really incredible improvements, and I was like amazed how they got this to work. So basically, one of the main caveats of the original toy was that the Guilty and Innocent didn't work. They were just stickers, so you saw both of them, but they never had a functioning screen because that was basically impossible to do back in 2005. But in the Artisan release, not only did they improve the toy by making it a little bit more detailed, they did have to make it bigger for this improvement, and they had additional sound effects included. Not only did they improve it in the area where you can swap out the ID badges, they were no longer stickers, you can insert them, and I think they were cardboard, that you can put them into the base of the changer, so you didn't have to sacrifice anyone, and they gave you all of them. So it wasn't just the Ranger form, they gave you the civilians images of the Rangers as well, but not only that, they had functioning Judgment mode. It had blinking lights for them. I was amazed they were able to fit in the LED lights into the things. They had to make it thicker. It was much more bigger, but overall, it was a vast improvement over the original releases. So if I had a choice between the artisan versions and the original releases, definitely get the artisan version. Now today they'd be much more expensive because they're long since discontinued. But yes, the artisan versions of the SP and Master license and Fire Squad license, S tier. Then I have to mention, of course, Deca Bright, which was just a very simple repaint of Deca Bright's throttle. Hers was just simply gold with an M logo replacing the 6. It was never released officially as a toy. There's probably many people who have done repaints, but overall, it's the same function. Now we go to Mystic Force. Now, I did really like this season. And I really liked how, like, even though I prefer the Japanese toys over the English ones, I did like that they did, do a full, voice work for all the buttons, the magical spells. They put in the effort. Like in the other seasons, like in Overdrive, they didn't care about the Overdrive tracker's voice or anything, so they didn't really do much with it. So I was really grateful that they did. Although I still found it strange that they changed the morph activation code in Mystic Force to 123. It was different in the Japanese version. But I have to pick the Japanese version overall. The one main feature they took out in the US version was the wand. You can open up the Japanese version and make the wand come out. This couldn't flip closed. Once you open the lid, the wand would automatically come out. I do like its design. Again, it was starting to get into like, oh, another Morpher that's a phone. But it was unique enough, like, okay, it's a phone, but it actually is still an overall wand. So they did put the aesthetics into it. They put effort and detail into it. So I was okay with that. I would definitely give this a B. It's unique. I just think I think what made it go down for me is mainly because there were 2 releases. One was the later one was actually included the legendary mode, so that you can, it's in there, but it was in this really limited release that came with a cape, so most people don't even know it existed. So that was annoying. A lot of the spells are not from the show are not in it, so it's not 100% complete, even the Japanese version. And because the inserts for like which ranger you want to be was cardboard, it's commonly lost. So whenever you get used ones like I did, I don't have the cardboard inserts. So that's an annoyance. And of course, cardboard in general can wear out or rip apart fairly easy. So it's kind of like, I wish they had thought of it in a different way. But then again, like, what other way they could have done it? Because the emblem is here, and the only one that they printed on it was reds. The grip phone, which was very unique. Again, it put in the elements of Maji Shine because his motif was trains, so it's a ticker tape puncher. So I thought that was really unique. Now in the US version, they didn't do that. They took that function out and they put it as a dagger because his name was Daggeron. I guess that's why. The design I think is okay. I have to make it a C though, because they made it a real hole puncher. That was the only negative. It's 2 negatives actually because of that. One, because it's a real hole puncher, you can't actually insert the cards. You got a ton of cards, which was cool. You got all the cards that he used in the show and the set, and I was like, great, that's cool. But then, like, you'll make a hole in it, so you can't use the hole puncher function. They do give you a blank card so that you don't want to waste the ones, but again, I wish they didn't. I wish there was an ability to turn off the hole puncher function, where like it can go up in the thing, so you can use them over and over again. And the second reason, if you wanted to fix the toy because of the hole puncher and it has to catch the paper, it has a little tray that pops out, and so you can empty it. But the tray is held in by a rod, which cannot be removed. So if the toy breaks for some reason, the speaker went bad, you spilled water in it, age got to it, you can't open it without breaking it. So unfortunately, that's why I'm going to give it a lower score. Now, there was a gold release of it. It was basically, it's just a recolor. It was, based on that special Kondonsha, a video bonus episode where, it was about, Red, Maji Red turned into Maji Shine, so it was gold, so he got a gold one. Literally identical. There was no real difference. And it only came in with a special edition version of Travel On. So you couldn't really buy it separately, and it came in its own unique box. I was looking to get a hold of it. Now, the Uza phone and Mother phone, they were never released in the US. Don't understand why, because, I understand the whole argument of like, oh, evil Rangers don't sell well. But here's the funny thing. Japan does release the villains eventually because they know they're going to turn good. It's actually one way to guess the story. If toys are released for the evil Ranger in a season, from past experiences, if you have an evil Ranger for way too long, for example, Albaret Killer, his products didn't sell good because he was so evil for so long, kids did not want to buy it. So eventually he turned good, but it was basically at the end of the series. They were selling Korag stuff, Woolzard stuff fairly early on because they knew he was going to turn good. So you can kind of cheat how a story will progress because of that. But his Ouzophone was fairly unique. I did like its design. It does have a unique voice and spell codes for Woolzard as well, so it's not like it's a repaint. So I highly suggest you get Ouzophone as well because it's more unique. Now the mother phone, it's pretty much identical to the Maji phone. Again, the only difference is that it's only operated by Maji Mother, so it has her motif, the star, and it being white. Get it if you're a completionist or because you just like Maji Mother's design. I liked Maji Mother in general. I loved all their designs, so I have every single changer from their line. I think the Maji Mother phone should have been released with Udana. I definitely would put the Ouzophone and Maji Mother phone in B. Next is Overdrive's Tracker and the Mercury Morpher. Japanese versions I would definitely pick, but the English versions are not too horrible, although the Mercury Morpher does have a significant downgrade because it removed the cool animated LCD screen and the dial function. The Overdrive Tracker, or the Exceller in Bokinger, I think it was really very unique. It had this whole thing with the scanning of the precious. It had an ultraviolet light, so it had these extra things like tokens. It's a little bonus thing. And the aesthetics was very unique. Okay, it's another cell phone, but because it was designed in a way where it can flip sideways for scanning functions, and it had that cool screen, so I really don't count it as a phone. The Japanese version had these really cool functions for all the modes. The only problem was that it doesn't have the Voyager mode, so everyone freaking hated it because it was like it had all the other modes in there, including some that were not released and people figured out, but they did not have Voyager's code in there at all to activate it. And I did like the whole spinning thing because that was like the unique thing about Overdrive. It had this, so I did like its design. So I would definitely put the Overdrive Tracker as an A. The Mercury Morpher, Japanese version, specifically the English version, took out too many functions and did really cool functions. It doesn't have that many sound effects as the Overdrive Tracker, but it makes up with that with the way it functions. It has a really cool animated screen, which is basically numbers, kind of like the Quantum Morpher had the number, but it has two, and you can actually select which Zord to call out, and of course form the Megazord. Like when they first showed Taizan doing his Megazord formation, he had to go through each one. That's actually how the toy functions. You have to initially call all of them, and then basically you can activate the Megazord formation through that. So it does all the show functions, and it has this cool animated screen on the left side. So I really love that design. It did add to his because he searches for stuff specifically, and it also looks like a compass. So it adds to much of his specific theme. So I would definitely put it in S. I really like that changer, and I wish I had it. I don't have the Japanese version. Well, next up is going to be a very unique moment. We have to actually categorize the Japanese and U.S. morphers as separate things because in Jungle Fury, they decided to go away from the Geki changers. The gloves that were on their suits were actually their morphers, changers. And I guess because they didn't want kids to punch people, even though they'd still do it. They still released the toy, which I don't understand, but they just did not want to count them as morphers, even though that's what they were. So the Geki changers, first off, it has motion. So if you're doing this, it made sound effects. It would light up. It has the 3 buttons on the gloves so that when you did the change transformation, when you did this, it would activate the change sound effects. So it had all the main key functions from the TV show. It actually has like 31 sounds. It even has like a paper that's hidden inside the compartment at the end where you can take out like the combinations and stuff that you can do with it. So that was really cool. So it came with a little list of features. I have to give it a B. I wanted to give it an A, but then I remembered it's a kid's series. It's going to be a very small toy, but because of its unique design being gloves, it only really specifically fits kids. Even though they made the straps long enough to fit on an adult, the plastic portion is still kid size. So I have to take out, you know, points because it's very annoying to use. Because it does have the area where you can bend your hand, because you know it's not a glove and it has to be plastic. Because it's too small, it doesn't work right. So you really hurt your hands and you can't really use them. So yeah, I would love to give it an A, but it's got to be a B because it's just not really functional. I wish they had considered adults more in that regard. Now, the Gong Changer / Wolf Morpher. Another unique design, but, you know, the only thing going for it, and this is for the Japanese version too, it's for both versions. The Japanese version is better, because the English version took out the chrome and stuff. The die-cast gong in the Japanese version, really cool looking, but it doesn't have that many functions. I'm going to give the Wolf Morpher a C. Even though it's unique, it doesn't really do many things, unfortunately. Went from the Geki Changers to the Gong Changer, lost a lot of features. Now, like I said, Jungle Fury created their own Morpher, the Solar Morpher. Unlike most people, I don't hate it. Now, I hate the toy version of it. The toy version is complete crap, because in the show, they each have unique sunglasses for their Morphers, the red, blue, yellow. They didn't want to do that in the toy versions. They just have this weird piece that attaches to the top. It's huge. It's mostly gray. I didn't mind the whole being sunglasses. I mean, it's very different from Morphers in general, so I don't see them ever doing it, because again, the main issue with the Morpher is that it couldn't do much, because that was another reason why the toy version was huge, because they had to add sound effects, but because it aesthetically looks crappy, I don't like it. I would give it a higher rating because I did like its design, the prop version. If it had the sound effects and it had, you know, and it was colored to each of the Rangers, so you basically had like 3 versions in the box, I would have definitely given it a B. But because it's the toy version's crap, F. When it comes to the Rhino Morpher, that technically wasn't the Morpher for the Ranger. We made it the Morpher because he used Geki Changers pretty much, so he had the same thing. I understand why they did it, because again, like, you gotta sell a toy, so they made that the Morpher. I have to include it because it was the US Morpher. Going to RPM is where we start going into the horrific US stage of the toys, where, oh, they were abysmal at this point, so I would only suggest the Japanese version, even though the Japanese version had issues. The Rev Morpher, again, all the sound effects rely on the engine soul, so I really did like the idea of engine souls, where you can either communicate with your partner, or you had all the add-ons and stuff that you can activate through your changer. However, I'm gonna give the Rev Morpher a C, even with the Japanese version, because the main reason why is this. While the sound effects are isolated to the changer, the keypad on the Rev Morpher does not work. It's fake in all versions. So you can do change, you can do call, because that's all built into the engine soul sound effects. But the buttons and numbers, they don't do anything. So it's a big hunk of plastic. And plus, the top holds the engine soul. It makes it top heavy, and the top is very bulky. And because of the design flaws, I also have to give points off, because the buttons are very easy to miss in the toy, and notoriously get missed or skipped or stopped because of that. And I wish the electronics were built into the toy, while the engine souls activated specific sound effects when you inserted it. Same goes for the Cell Shift Morpher. I did like this Morpher more than that because it's unique. It's basically a pump. So it's unique to the theme, but again, it does suffer from design faults. All the electronics are in the soul, so again, it can misfire and not play sound effects. The handle's cool in the Japanese version. You know, it has some chrome. It has leather, fox leather. The strap on it was very unique as well, but overall, it didn't really have that many functions. Besides the handle being unique, it only had like 3 sounds, so it really didn't do much. So I would definitely give it a C. The Sky Morpher, it's cool because it's a part of their cockpit, and it does look like, you know, flight control sticks. That's unique, but again, even weaker design. It does have the same design faults with the electronics not firing properly. And I did like the back button for the when you have to change. However, nothing works. It's a sticker on the side. There's no keypads, there's no additional sound effects. Yes, it does connect to the rocket dagger in order to do the combo and finisher and stuff, but that doesn't really give that many functionality to it. It just simply connects to the top, and that's it. And I really wish it had additional sound effects in the thing. So again, D, because it just has so little functions. Samurai. Ugh. specifically have to go with the Japanese version. The English versions are absolutely abysmal because they were like, we're going to remove the calligraphy mode in it, even though it's a highly Japanese show that you 99% kept anyway. So I never understood why they took that feature out. So in the US version, it looks stupid because since they took it out and they don't have it in the show, they just simply made it flat. So the phone looks like garbage. None of this, it doesn't have like a couple sounds. The keypad doesn't even work. Now, I do like this Shoto phone, aka the Samuraizer. I think its design is very unique because, again, like, how do you, like, incorporate a calligraphy, pen, brush, for Japanese symbols to do all those things in a modern age without looking stupid? And it was a cool idea to incorporate it into a phone. Yes, it's another phone. At this point, I was tired of phones because, Japan was obsessed with phones. They use it so much, but I think, it grew on me. So I'm going to give them props on how it was like, because it has to not only function as a phone, it has to open and close, but it has to open sideways in order to go into brush mode. So it has to do 3 different things. So it has a very unique design. I do like all the little references here and there on the screen, like, how it says 2009 in its time, so that, that's when it was originally released. I will give them props. In the Samuraizer version, they did change that to 2011 when it did air, so they kind of kept that motif going. So that was cool in that regard. But in the US version, none of the buttons worked, so except for like 2 or 3, I think. Very disappointing toy. It's extremely small. So if you want absolute accuracy from the show and functionality and detail, Shoto phone. Get the Shoto phone. Although, even the Shoto phone does have non-functional buttons on the side that flips open because, again, there was just no way to fit the electronics on the end. So only the left side and red buttons actually function on the toy. But at least you can activate, specific cast spells and, symbols and whatnot. And then it does do Ippitsu Sojo. You do hear the wishing sound effects for the change. Now, in Samurai's case, we did not get the sushi changer. We got basically a crappy repaint of the Samuraizer. So we got the gold Samuraizer, which was painted gray. I never understood why, for a Gold Ranger, you painted it gray. And literally did nothing special. They did change the voice in the Morpher, even though it wasn't even Antonio, because they didn't even hire the actors to do voices for the toys at all either there. But yeah, functionality-wise, it was crap. So definitely do not get the Gold Ranger Morpher for that as well. And what was really sad was when they actually showed it on the show. It looked very horrible. Now, because they just simply didn't want to use the sushi changer because, again, it would not fit into Antonio's theme. Now, if they actually put effort into the toy, they could have made it fish-themed. I don't know. It could have been based off one of his Zords. They could have maybe took the elements from the sushi changer and then incorporated it and just make a fish version of it. That's what they could have done if they wanted to put effort into it, but they just didn't do it. In the sushi changer's case, I did like it. I have the sushi changer myself personally. I do like it. In this case, it actually has all functioning buttons. You can do all his main modes. You can activate, change. It does all the function where you put the heating disc on top and it folds up into sushi, and you can activate it like that. So it does all the features in the show. And the only real negative is because it's sushi and it's white, it's starting to yellow, and I expect over the next 10 years it's probably going to look pretty bad in most cases. It's just unfortunate because it was really white. I remember when I got it brand new, it was very nicely white, and like 1 or 2 years later, it just started going yellow. It's not even. It was pretty quick. So unfortunately, they're going to probably look pretty ugly in as time goes along. But I would definitely say the Shoto phone, I would put it as an A. I really love its unique design. Sushi changer, I would put in B. It's cool. It's just kind of bulky, and then it has the negative of the toy yellowing. Okay, we're moving on to Megaforce. Now, I'm not a fan of the Gosei Morpher, Japanese version or not. Japanese version is preferable because it actually can read the cards. Now, don't get me wrong, the English version can read the cards, but they did rework it so it doesn't work exactly the same way. I don't think it could read every single card that was made in the TCG. I don't know. In general, I just didn't care about the TCG. I know it was a cool idea. Cards are fine. It's just the way it was done. It was mainly this whole tiki mouth. You had to put the card in. You do this. I will say this though. Normally, I complain when they shrink the toy in the U.S. version. the Japanese version is fairly large. It's kind of cumbersome, so I actually prefer the US version size versus the Japanese version, but the Japanese version is much more better because it has more functionality. Although, the same thing, its main feature is scanning of the cards, so it does technically have a lot of electronics, but for functionality-wise, meaning like, yeah, when you have to talk to it, you're talking to a face, so it looks weird. It doesn't really have any other controls, so you can't summon things except with the cards. Overall, I'm going to say it's a C. I won't make it, it's not a horrible toy. Now for the Morpher, again, it had more functionality. You do a lot of the codes and activations through the keypad versus scanning because they don't have the scanning function. You put the cards in the top, but you can't actually scan them. You have to enter them through the number system. So I thought that was cool, but again, I didn't really care about the changer in general. Doesn't matter English, Japanese, because again, the character Robo, yeah, he's a 6th Ranger, but he wasn't really used again because he wasn't human. So they kind of just like neglected him. So overall, I didn't really care. His changer connected to his main weapon, so it acted as a targeting device. So that was a cool function. But yeah, because of lack of use, and I didn't care for the season motif in general, and the season overall, it was very lackluster. It was just one of those seasons I didn't care for. Unfortunately, I'm going to put his in D. Now, Super Mega Force, which was based off Gokaiger, Japanese versions have to be because even though the Japanese versions don't have all the sound effects that they should have done in the toy, they have a ton of sound effects and a ton of support for the keys. Now, the English version is not horrible in that area either, electronic-wise. Size-wise, it sucked. The way it opens was crap. Because it's supposed to have the pirate thing, and then it just opened. It didn't even open right. It instead of flipping open like the Japanese version, it just does that the top parts pop out. It's very cheesy and crumbly, so that's why I never liked the English version at all. The Japanese version, I do love. I have the Legend one that was made for Aka Red. I have his version, which at the time when that came out, it had the most sound effects. That was the main problem with Gokaiger, I think, is because they kept adding more keys over time. There was no definitive toy version of it until the Memorial Edition, but even then, they have to do those add-ons if they make more keys, where they have to do that stupid thing you have to insert in order to do a key. So again, the key motif was cool, but it was so hectic in hell in order to get those keys and stuff. I'm going to put some points away from it. I would like to make an S. It's a cool Morpher, don't get me wrong, with the keys and stuff. But I'm going to make it an A simply because it doesn't seem to end with the keys. So no matter which version you get, even the Memorial Edition will probably end up being outdated at some point. The Silver Morpher. How lazy can you get with naming? That was another thing with PR in recent years. They got really bad with naming. Okay, to be fair, because I know someone will say, well, in MMPR, everything was called Power this, Power that. That's lazy. Agreed. But then we came back to it with Silver Morpher. At least it's silver for, a Silver Ranger versus Antonio. I liked his Morpher. I have the Japanese version. Even with the Memorial Edition add-ons, overall, it's a very annoying Morpher because from what you see in the show, and he has to push the button, but it actually scans keys. So you thought the scanning functionality would be in the toy. So meaning you put the key in, it would recognize what key you put in there, and it would say the name. No, it has less electronics because of that scanning feature. Also, the scanning feature, very loud in the original release. That was like one of the positives in the Memorial Edition, which they improved on. They made it a more quieter. And also, it loved to get stuck, the original release. So the Memorial Edition improved on it. So I'll get to it later. But the original release, overall, while it did have cool functions, it had the gold mode key on the bottom, and it did have the add-on, which, again, part of the Memorial Edition. I'm going to give it a C because of the lack of electronics. It was a downgrade from the Mobiritz. Yeah, it was just too annoying, and it uses button cell batteries, so it made it even more annoying when you had to deal with the, replacing the batteries. As for the Memorial Editions for the Legendary Morpher and the Silver Morpher, I would definitely give them solid A's. They do vastly improve, like Silver Morphers, fix the weird sound issue that the spinning motor did when it went down. It jammed less. Overall, though, even the Memorial Edition, they didn't add the functionality I really would have liked. I mean, they couldn't really because there would be no backwards compatibility. The main issue that I hated was that, yes, it recognizes the Ranger key that you put in. So, like, you put in a Jew Ranger key, the guy will say Jew Ranger. However, it doesn't recognize the actual Rangers that's inserted. So it won't say Aka Ranger. It won't say Terra Ranger, Ho-Ho Ranger, things like that. You won't hear the Ranger names. They never add that functionality because the keys are only one. They only have it for the team. They never made keys specifically for the Ranger, and they never added that functionality because they really couldn't. They would have to reissue every single key. So it was already at the point where it's just like, oh, forget it. We can't fix this problem. So the multi-wrist one, while it's great, both versions improved on them. They only deserve A. Now we go to the Dino Charge Morpher. I think it's our first Morpher that is nothing like that's been done before. No hand device, no buckle device. It's now a gun, which was pretty cool. Now the US version sucks because, again, gun, even though it's a fantasy gun and like, oh, this giant piece of yellow plastic? Oh, yeah, totally cops can misidentify it as a real gun. Yeah, that makes sense. But, you know, gun laws, we got to put the stupid orange tips on them. So again, I'll prefer the Japanese version overall because they don't have to do that. But in general, they lack sound effects. The main things is that you can put the batteries in and you have different sound effects. Now, I know the English version can do that, but in the Japanese version, it also had the second barrel, which I don't remember the English version. I'm pretty sure it didn't have it. So I'm like, okay, that has that additional thing. Its design is pretty cool. I do like it. However, it's one thing. Because it's a gun, and, you know, in the show, they twirl it around. But if you want to do it with a toy, you're going to really hurt your finger because, A, it's freaking heavy, and B, that switch does not help with twirling. So, yeah, I don't even know how the actors avoided that problem in the show. They must have hurt their finger many times while doing that weird thing. I would definitely give it a B. Even though it does have a fair bit of electronics and stuff, because again, it comes down to a gun. You can only do so much with it. You have to have all the add-ons to make it complete. Now, the Terra Charge Morpher, I really wanted to like it because it's unique. Because you have to use your hand. It works with the sword. You kind of work with the sword as an add-on. But it really does not have a lot of sound effects in it. It can't read the batteries, which was a complete missed opportunity. The English version is garbage. It's way too small, doesn't do anything. But the Japanese version was pretty large, so it actually works with adult hands. It's still cramped. The hand part, it's a little too small, but the straps they made for it, good. They learned their lesson with the gate changers, so I don't really mind it. But it doesn't have sound effects in it at all. It only can read the one, and that is it. It cannot do anything else. So yeah, I'm going to put that changer in D. It doesn't deserve an F, but it's a very poor changer design, even in the Japanese version. The Giga Gabu revolver that was made for Torn, basically the red, white, and blue, which was like interesting that they kind of made the American flag there. I don't know if it was done on purpose that way or it was just, coincidence. It's pretty much the exact same thing as the Gabu revolver. So if you had a personal favorite, Gabu revolver, Giga Gabu revolver, like you were a fan of Torin, pick either one. Don't get both. They do the exact same thing, so you can function that way. I guess if you were a completionist, of course you would want both, but if you only want one, pick his. Again, he would fall under the same tier list as the Gabu revolver because there's no real difference. Ninja Steel, which I almost actually forgot because the season is just so crummy and it's just like, ugh. But, we run into another problem like how Jungle Fury, they changed the Morpher again. In the Ninja, their changer was the Ichibanto sword. While we made the Ninja Battle Morpher, the star thing, their Morpher, even though it was just an add-on weapon. That's the reason why we don't really see it used in the show, in the Ninja footage, because again, it was just an add-on weapon that kind of got neglected after a while. Now, since the Morphers were completely different things between the two versions, which one do I actually prefer? They're not bad in general. The Ninja Battle Morpher had functions because, again, the Japanese version had a couple of functions. You can do the bow thing. It had, you can put in the stars. It had sound effects. So it's like, I didn't hate it. The English version is a crappier version. So if you wanted the Japanese version to work like the American Morpher, I would definitely say get the Japanese version. But I would definitely give it a B. Now, the original changer that was used in the Ninja, I'm going to still give it a B. It has cool features, cool sound effects, cool additional things that you can do with it to charge up, put in the stars, stuff. The main issue, again, when it comes to swords and guns in general, they're shrunk. They're too small. We don't have a memorial edition for it that's full-scale prop. So, if they did make that one, I would definitely put it as an A. But the Japanese version, same boat as the English Morpher. The Ninja Star Burger, which was never used, although technically it was in Ninja Steel. We did see it as a camera, so it wasn't there technically. I thought it was hilarious. Star Ninja was supposed to be a joke on Americans, Western, poncho, this, all that. Of course, they were going to give his changer a burger. It makes absolutely no sense in the theme, except because he's American, got to have burger. But, you know, Japan loves burgers. It's a crazy design. The Star Ninja is the cheese that gets put in. It still is a communication device, so he still talks through it. It's a very unorthodox changer. And it kind of makes you think of that old Happy Meal toy that was a dinosaur in McDonald's and it popped up its head, you know. But I didn't like it. Even though it's a joke, I just didn't like it. So yeah, C. Oh, Beast Morphers. Now, they technically altered the toy because they wanted to add more functionality to the used version. They added all the keys and stuff. But, you know, really, it didn't really change the toy overall. It still did the same functions. You know, because in the toy, it does insert. But, you know, it did do the button thing. It did have the bird come out, which was the visor thing. The Morpher from Go Busters, you know, it's okay, but it has very little functionality to it. It has, you know, it is reminiscent to, like, say, the Mercury Morpher. It does have the dial and the pushing stuff to activate those sounds, but overall, it's mostly air. Because it has the visor bird thing that comes out on top to do that part, it really didn't have any extra features. You know, the power-up that connects to the Morpher later on, it has its own sound effects, but the original toy itself doesn't really do much. So technically, the English version does add functionality to it, but the keys are so cheap, I don't really like it. But then the Japanese version is not great either, so you know, kind of torn on it. The Japanese version aesthetically is better, but functionality, they both suck. I guess I'll put the Beast X Morpher in C. Now the Striker Morpher, oh no, it did not even. It technically did not exist in the English version because they didn't make it. It was a Nerf gun, so it doesn't even qualify as the Morpher. Get the Japanese version. It actually has way more functions anyway compared to the Beast X Morpher. It's much more detailed. It has the FOMO. You know how it flips out as a gun, but it can actually do that in the toy. Okay, I will say, though, the toy doesn't really have that many electronics because the buttons on it are fake as well. The Japanese version looks more show accurate. So I don't want to put it in C. I'll put it in B. But it's really not that far in B, and it would be more of a C. It's just, unfortunately, it just doesn't do as much as you expect it to do. Which leads us to Dino Fury. I think both the English and Japanese versions are fairly good. Aesthetically, the English version is very close. So I will give Hasbro that. They did a very close copy of the Japanese version. There's a slight difference here and there. The keys are way different. I prefer the Japanese version overall, but the functionality of the English one and its aesthetics, it's very close. I think it's a cool design. I think it's a little too wide. I think the Morpher's too wide. I never used the Japanese version. I have no idea if it can read all the keys. I'm assuming it does, but it's actually, you can still find the Japanese version pretty easily. So I guess it wasn't as popular as you would think in Roost Soldier. Some seasons just not as popular, so you can still find them for fairly good prices. I do like the whole opening the jaw and spinning it. B. Now the Gold Fury Morpher, or the Gold Fury Blade Blaster Morpher. I don't know why they made it that huge long name. I was like, oh yeah, let's throw back to the Blade Blaster. I was like, didn't need to. English version is slightly worse than the Japanese version, but the Japanese version is not even that great too. I think both Japan and the US were starting to kind of merge in plastic practices because, again, you know, Japanese toys are expensive in general as it is. It's common to pay like $70 for any of these toys in Japan on average because, again, you know, import costs. They have to, you know, it's expensive there. But because prices in general have been going up as well, Japan has been starting to do very similar practices to what Hasbro is. So they've been not lowering the quality, but you could see that with the way they designed the toy, they didn't put as many details. And I think also it's another way of probably making a justification for the Memorial Edition. Like if we make the original toy not as detailed, but put the detail that was missing in the Memorial Edition, people want to buy it again. So I think that's also another factor in why they started doing it. Overall, you know, again, can read the keys. It's the gun. It's his Morpher. Cool idea, but, you know, Dino Charge already kind of did that thing. Dino Fury's arsenal in general for me, I didn't care about. I don't have anything from Roost Soldier or from Dino Fury. I just did not care about it. And there are improvements in Dino Fury's line. Like, they did release stuff that Japan didn't, so that was cool. But I don't know. And normally, I care about the Dino season, but for whatever reason, the designs and themes and arsenal weapons and stuff, everything. Didn't matter. Japanese version as well. It just didn't click with me. It was the first time a Dino season did not click with me. And Dino Thunder, I really loved its design, even though it was very crazy and hectic. I got everything from Dino Thunder. I got the majority of stuff from MMPR. It was just, I don't know. Its aesthetics this time around didn't go for me. So yeah, I unfortunately would put his blaster in C. But yeah, there's a lot of morphers in Power Rangers. I think Power Rangers has a very good run of design. It must be very hard at this time. For 40 years, you've been trying to come up with things that change the hero into the hero. So, like, there's so much that's been done right now. So there's very little they can do. I mean, they can go into more unorthodox designs. Like, we had done swords. We have done buckles. We have done weapons. Changers of wrist mounts, phones, digital devices, PDAs, smartphones, brushes too. I mean, there is a few things left that they haven't been done. Like, like Roof Soldier was kind of knight-ish, but like, why don't you actually have a knight, like, armor system actually done for the Ranger this time around? That would be really cool. Like, imagine the Changer was actually broken into, like, that would actually form armor around the Ranger. It would come, like, you would see like a figurine in there. But then again, figurines were done in kind of the Ranger keys way. So even then, like, it could be a unique design, but then it's something of the element has been done in the past. Some really crazy design, like, a postman, like, mail as a changing device. Imagine like a scanner of some kind like that. That they haven't really done like that. I mean, there's probably gems, maybe crystals specifically. The Changer is made out of a crystal type of device. Maybe one day they'll have a Changer that looks like money, that uses money to scan. Who knows? Maybe they can figure out some way to work that in. Super Sentai / Power Rangers Changers are the more cooler of the transformation devices. Yeah, Kamen Rider is its own thing. And don't get me wrong, I love Kamen Rider's belts. But I think, because again, you're stuck with belts. You can't really deviate from that. You have one thing. While Changers can deviate into so many things. It could be a shield. It could be a sword. It could be a wrist-mounted device. Or it could be a hybrid of that. Wrist mount that can come off and it could be a phone. So you have more leeway of making a unique design. If you have suggestions on what type of tier list you would like me to cover, maybe rate the Rangers, or maybe rate a personality or a trope that the show likes to do, or monster type. Leave a comment below on like what other type of tier list you would like to see me do.